You are standing still, perhaps lying down, perhaps already halfway into rest. Your body grows heavy in the familiar way it does at night, when the world asks less of you. Beneath you there is ground. Solid, dependable, unchanging, or so it feels. But tonight, instead of rushing past that thought, you linger with it. You imagine the ground not as an object, but as a presence. Something that exists in time, not just space. The earth beneath you is quiet, but it is not empty. It holds warmth the way a body does beneath a blanket. Deep below the surface, heat moves slowly, drifting upward at a pace so gentle it is almost kind. This warmth is not fire or danger. It is memory, left over from the planet's long formation, still traveling outward after billions of years. You can picture it as a slow breath, rising through layers of stone the way air moves through sleeping lungs. If you listen closely, not with your ears, but with your imagination, the ground does not feel dead. It feels patient. Rocks press against one another, minerals settle into balance, and tiny movements ripple silently through the crust. These motions are so small they never disturb your day. They are measured in millimeters, in centuries, in thoughts that take longer than a human lifetime to complete. You live on the outer skin of a warm, layered world. The surface where you walk is thin compared to what lies beneath. Below you stretch miles of rock, stacked like chapters in a book that has been written slowly, carefully, without haste. Each layer formed under different conditions at different times, when the world above looked nothing like it does now. Oceans came and went. Mountains rose and softened. Ice advanced and retreated. And still, the earth kept breathing. This breathing is not dramatic. There is no sound, no rhythm you could tap your fingers to. Instead, it is a movement of energy. Heat flows from the core toward the surface because it must. Pressure builds where material is trapped, and eases where cracks allow release. Nothing here is emotional. Nothing panics. Physics is calm. It follows rules without worry, like water flowing downhill in the dark. You might imagine the earth as a giant engine, but that image feels too harsh for this moment. Tonight, it feels more like a resting animal. One that shifts slightly in its sleep, adjusting weight, releasing warmth, remaining deeply alive while appearing still. You are safe on its back, even as it moves through processes far older than your species. The ground beneath you has known silence far longer than sound. Long before voices, before footsteps, before cities, it cooled and cracked and rearranged itself. What you call solid is actually the slow result of motion that never truly stops. Even now, atoms vibrate gently in place. Crystals hold their shapes through balance, not force. Stability, you realize, is not the absence of movement. It is movement that has learned how to rest. As you breathe in, your chest rises. As you breathe out, it falls. This simple motion connects you, quietly, to the planet below. Both of you exchange heat with your surroundings. Both of you release energy without effort. Your body learned this rhythm without being taught. The earth learned its rhythms through time so long it no longer needs memory to continue. Somewhere far beneath you, rock is soft, not hard. Heat has made it flexible, slow, willing to flow under pressure. This is not something to fear. It is part of how the planet stays balanced. When heat gathers too much, it searches for paths to escape. Sometimes it finds them gently, through tiny cracks, warming groundwater, feeding springs, releasing steam in size so quiet most people never notice. You are not meant to feel this activity directly. The surface is designed by physics, by chance, by time to shield you. Thick layers absorb energy, spread it out, slow it down. By the time warmth reaches you, it feels like nothing at all. You walk on ground that has already done the work of protection for you, endlessly, without pause. It is easy to forget this when days are loud. When thoughts move quickly and time feels sharp, the ground seems irrelevant. But at night, when the world softens, you can sense how much effort goes into stillness. How much quiet work supports every calm moment you experience. The earth does not rush to show itself. Prefers patience. The idea that something powerful could be resting beneath you might sound unsettling at first. But rest is not a warning. It is a state of balance. Just as your body recovers while you sleep, the planet releases and redistributes energy over vast spans of time. Nothing here is sudden. Nothing here is waiting to surprise you tonight. As your breathing slows, your awareness sinks downward, not in fear, but in trust. The layers beneath you feel like blankets stacked gently, each one holding warmth, each one keeping what lies below from touching what lies above too quickly. You are held by this structure, supported by processes that have never needed your attention to work. Stillness, you realize, is not emptiness. Silence is not absence. Beneath you, something ancient continues its slow, careful breathing. It does not need to wake. It does not need to act. It simply remains, carrying heat, memory, and time forward, one unhurried moment after another. And as you rest on this breathing ground, your thoughts begin to drift backward, toward the stories written deep inside stone, waiting quietly to be remembered. You begin this journey by letting time loosen its grip on you. The present moment fades slightly, not disappearing, but becoming transparent. Beneath your awareness, the ground opens itself not downward, but backward. You are not falling through space. You are drifting through memory. The earth remembers in layers, and tonight, it invites you to read them slowly. Rock is not just material. It is time made visible. Each layer beneath you forms quietly, one grain at a time, settling into place without urgency. Dust falls, ash drifts, sand presses down. Over years that turn into centuries, and centuries that soften into ages, weight transforms these loose fragments into stone. Nothing rushes. Memory here is patient. You imagine these layers stacked beneath your feet like pages in an ancient book. The newest pages sit on top, crisp and close to the surface. Below them, older pages grow darker, heavier, more compressed. Some pages are smooth, others rough, some thin as whispers, others thick with history. The deeper you go, the slower time feels until seconds no longer make sense. In these layers, the earth records events without judgment. A volcanic eruption becomes a blanket of ash, settling gently after the violence has passed. Floods leave fine sediments, spread evenly, like careful handwriting. Forests fall, rot, and vanish, leaving traces of carbon pressed into stone. Nothing is erased. It is simply covered, preserved by what comes next. You may think of memory as fragile, something that fades. But the Earth's memory is different. It does not rely on thought or emotion. It relies on weight. Pressure seals experiences into place, protecting them from forgetting. Even chaos, once it settles, becomes orderly. Ash cools. Lava hardens. The memory of heat becomes rock. As you drift deeper, colors change. Pale sands give way to darker bands. Grays shift into reds, blacks, and greens. Each color tells a quiet story about chemistry, temperature, and time. Iron leaves a rusty signature. Carbon darkens the stone. Minerals align themselves according to invisible rules, forming patterns no one designed, yet all of them precise. You do not need to understand the chemistry to feel its presence. These layers feel calm. They do not argue with one another. They stack, accept pressure, and adapt. Older layers do not resent being buried. They understand that memory does not require visibility to remain real. Somewhere deep in this layered archive, you pass through ash from ancient supereruptions. When they happened, the sky dimmed and landscapes changed. But now they are quiet. Reduced to thin, pale lines in stone, they rest without drama. The earth does not relive its past. It records it, then moves on. This is where human time begins to feel small, not insignificant, but brief. Your memories live inside a soft, living brain, reshaped constantly by emotion and sleep. The planet's memories live in pressure and mineral bonds, immune to distraction. They wait patiently for anyone curious enough to read them. You imagine a geologist slicing through these layers, revealing their patterns. What looks like simple rock becomes a story once you know how to listen. A thick ash layer means a powerful eruption. A sudden change in grain size hints at floods or winds. Stone becomes language written slowly, without sound. But tonight, this is not about scientists or tools. It is about feeling the comfort of continuity. Nothing that has ever happened to this planet has truly vanished. It has simply settled into place, making room for what came next. Loss becomes layering. Endings become foundations. Even the ground beneath modern cities carries these memories. Roads rest on sediments shaped by vanished rivers. Buildings stand on rock that once lay beneath oceans. Beneath concrete and steel, the earth remembers a world without them and holds both realities at once without conflict. You realize that memory does not trap the earth in the past. It stabilizes it. Each new layer is supported by the ones below. The present exists because the past is strong enough to hold it. This is why the ground feels solid beneath your body. It is reinforced by everything that has ever been. As your breathing slows, this thought becomes comforting. You too are layered. Experiences stack within you, some close to the surface, others buried deep. Not all of them are visible. Not all of them need to be revisited. But they support who you are now quietly without asking for attention. The earth does not rush to uncover its memories. It allows erosion to reveal them slowly, grain by grain. Wind brushes away what is no longer needed. Water smooths edges over time. Exposure is gentle, never sudden. Even revelation follows a calm pace. Some memories remain buried forever, and that is not a failure. It is balance. The planet does not need to remember everything actively to function. It only needs to carry it forward, letting weight and time do their work. As you rest with this idea, the layers beneath you feel less like distance and more like depth. You are supported not just by rock, but by history itself. Every step you have ever taken rests on countless moments you will never witness, yet depend on completely. The deeper memories of the earth begin to blur together, becoming warmer, softer, less defined. Stone transitions into something slower, more fluid. Solid layers give way to regions where heat still lingers, where memory has not yet cooled into rock. And as your awareness drifts toward those deeper, warmer places, you begin to sense that below the memories written in stone, there are vast chambers where time waits even longer, holding its breath in the dark. You let your awareness sink deeper now, past the layered memories of stone, past the cool certainty of solid ground. There is no falling, no fear. The descent feels more like drifting, the way your thoughts loosen their grip as sleep approaches. Beneath the rigid crust, the earth becomes quieter, warmer, slower, as if time itself has learned to rest. Here, the rock changes its nature. It is no longer fully solid, no longer fully still. Heat softens it the way warmth softens wax or muscles after a long day. Pressure holds everything together, firm but gentle, encouraging patience rather than force. This is where the earth keeps its hidden chambers, vast spaces that exist without needing to be seen. You imagine these chambers as dark oceans, not of water, but of molten stone. Magma does not glow here the way it does in pictures. It is not a river of fire. It is thick, heavy, restrained by the weight of the world above it. It moves only when it must, shifting millimeter by millimeter, guided by pressure, temperature, and time. Nothing in these chambers is in a hurry. Heat accumulates slowly, the way thoughts gather before sleep, forming patterns without urgency. Minerals melt and mix, becoming something new without resistance. The chamber expands and contracts slightly, breathing in response to forces that unfold over thousands of years. This is not instability. This is balance working patiently. You realize that these hidden chambers are not anomalies. They are part of how the planet manages its energy. The Earth generates heat deep within itself, and that heat must go somewhere. Sometimes it escapes gently, spreading through surrounding rock. Sometimes it lingers, collecting in these chambers, waiting for conditions to change. Waiting here is not anticipation. It is simply existence. Magma does not wonder what will happen next. It responds when pressure finds a path, when cracks open, when density shifts. Until then, it rests, held in place by the immense weight of everything above it. The surface feels solid because this balance exists. You think about how rarely these chambers announce themselves. Entire civilizations rise and fall without ever noticing what lies beneath them. Cities hum, forests grow, oceans shift their tides, all while these hidden spaces remain quiet. Their presence is not a threat. It is a constant, steady background, like the slow beating of a heart you never need to hear. The scale of these chambers is difficult to imagine, and so you do not try too hard. Instead, you let the idea soften. Some are small, others enormous, stretching for miles in darkness. Some are shallow, others buried deep, layered beneath layers of older chambers that have cooled and hardened into rock. Each one exists as a moment in the Earth's long conversation with itself. Heat rises here not because it wants to escape, but because physics allows it. Hot material is less dense, and so it presses upward gently, testing the strength of the rock above. If the rock holds, the heat stays. If it yields slightly, the heat spreads and cools. Only rarely does it find a sudden path to the surface. Those rare moments are not what define these chambers. Most of their existence is quiet. They cool slowly, crystallizing at the edges, turning molten stone into solid minerals over time. What was once fluid becomes rigid, locking memory into place. The chamber changes shape, shrinks, or disappears entirely, having done its work without spectacle. You sense how deeply this process mirrors your own inner world. Thoughts form under pressure. Feelings gather warmth. Most never erupt. They settle, reshape you gently, become part of your structure. Only a few ever demand release, and even then, release does not mean destruction. It means transformation. The Earth does not fear its hidden chambers. It relies on them. They regulate heat, redistribute energy, and allow the planet to remain active without chaos. Without these pauses, without these reservoirs of warmth, the surface would be far less stable. Stillness depends on what rests below. As you linger with this idea, the chambers feel less mysterious and more familiar. Darkness does not mean danger. It means insulation. Heat does not mean violence. It means persistence. Pressure does not mean urgency. It means support. Time stretches differently here. 1,000 years feels brief. 10,000 years feels like a breath. The chambers change, but only in response to forces that unfold slowly enough to feel kind. Nothing snaps. Nothing shatters without preparation. The Earth prefers gradual change, even when it reshapes entire landscapes. You imagine these chambers sleeping, not because they are inactive, but because their activity is so slow it resembles rest. They do not dream of eruption. They simply exist, holding warmth, waiting for the rules of physics to guide their next movement. Above them, the surface remains calm. Seasons turn. Rivers carve their paths. Life adapts and continues. The chambers do not interrupt this unless absolutely necessary. They respect the weight of what depends on them, even though they feel nothing at all. Your breathing matches this rhythm now, slow and deep. Thoughts drift without forming conclusions. The idea of waiting no longer feels empty. It feels full, purposeful, complete. The hidden chambers below your dreams are not endings or beginnings. They are middles held patiently between past and future. As your awareness settles into this depth, you sense that some places on Earth allow this warmth to whisper closer to the surface, releasing gentle signs of what lies below, not as warnings, but as reminders of balance. You arrive gently at the surface again, not suddenly, but as if rising through warm water. The land here feels alive in a way that is quiet but unmistakable. Beneath wide skies and slow-moving clouds, the ground releases small signs of what rests below. Steam lifts lazily. Water shimmers with color. The Earth does not hide its warmth here, yet it does not rush to reveal it either. This place teaches you how waiting can be active. Yellowstone is not loud. It does not shout its power. Instead, it exhales. Geysers release bursts of water only after long patience. Hot springs glow softly, their colors shaped by heat-loving life too small to see without effort. The land seems to breathe in intervals, as if listening to itself before each movement. You imagine the vast heat below, the same hidden chambers you sensed earlier, now closer to the surface. Here, the Earth has found safe pathways to release energy without violence. Cracks allow warmth to rise. Water seeps down, heats slowly, and returns as steam. Pressure builds, waits, and then lifts gently into the air, leaving the ground calm once more. Nothing here is rushed. Some geysers wait hours between breaths. Others wait days. Some wait decades, shifting their rhythms without warning. Not because something is wrong, but because conditions change slowly. Minerals clog a channel. Water finds a new path. Balance adjusts, and the waiting begins again. You realize that patience is not emptiness. It is a process filled with preparation. Beneath each geyser, water collects gradually, heating molecule by molecule. Pressure increases quietly, without strain. When release finally comes, it is not an explosion. It is a letting go shaped by time. The springs tell similar stories. Pools glow blue, green, orange, and gold, not for beauty alone, but because heat creates environments where only certain life can exist. Tiny organisms thrive here, adapting to temperatures that would harm most living things. Life finds ways to remain calm even in extremes. You stand on boardwalks above fragile ground, aware that thin crust separates you from deep heat. Yet the feeling is not fear. It is respect. The surface holds because the system beneath it is balanced. Energy moves. Pressure releases. Nothing is trapped forever. Yellowstone is often misunderstood as something waiting to erupt, as if it is holding its breath in tension. But what you feel instead is regulation. The Earth is not preparing for drama. It is managing itself, allowing warmth to escape gradually so it does not build too much pressure below. This slow release is a form of intelligence, though it has no mind. Physics has shaped pathways that work. Over thousands of years, the land has learned how to stay stable. Steam vents, springs, and geysers are not warning signs. They are solutions. You think about how often humans misunderstand waiting. Stillness is mistaken for delay. Calm is mistaken for risk. But here, waiting is the reason nothing catastrophic happens. The Earth is doing exactly what it needs to do, precisely because it is not in a hurry. The ground beneath Yellowstone has changed many times. Channels clog. New vents open. Old geysers fall silent while others awaken. This shifting is not instability. It is adaptation. The system remains balanced by adjusting gently rather than resisting change. As your breathing slows, you feel how this lesson applies inward. When pressure builds inside you, release does not have to be explosive. It can be gradual. Thoughts can rise and fade like steam. Emotions can warm and cool without needing resolution tonight. Yellowstone teaches that power does not require urgency. Immense energy can exist quietly, managed by patience and pathways. The Earth does not fear its heat. It listens to it, guides it, and lets it go slowly. The colors of the springs deepen as light shifts across them. Steam catches sunlight and dissolves into the sky. Nothing lingers longer than it should. Nothing leaves too quickly. The land rests between breaths, perfectly comfortable with pause. You imagine standing here at night, stars above, steam glowing faintly in moonlight. The ground would still be warm. The rhythms would continue, unnoticed by most of the world. Balance does not need an audience. This place reminds you that release can be gentle, and that safety is often the result of patience practiced over long time. Yellowstone is not waiting to wake. It is awake already, in the calmest way possible. As you prepare to drift onward, you sense that scientists listen carefully to these signs, not to predict disaster, but to understand balance. They learn by paying attention, by measuring tiny changes, by respecting slowness. And as the steam rises and disappears, you feel curiosity settle softly in you, about how humans have learned to listen to such quiet signals, pressing their attention gently against the earth, waiting for it to speak. You are not doing anything wrong. Nothing needs to be fixed. You are simply arriving. You begin by noticing that your mind has always been moving, even when you were not paying attention. Thoughts drift in and out, memories rise and fade, sensations hum quietly in the background. It has always been this way. Like a river beneath a bridge, the flow continues whether you stop to watch it or not. As you settle here, you imagine that river. Not dramatic, not rushing, just steady, patient water moving through a familiar landscape. This river is your brain. It has been flowing since before you can remember, shaped by years of repetition, routine, and gentle learning. Every time you reached for a word, recognized a face, or followed a habit without thinking, the river followed the same soft curves it always had. These curves are neural pathways, though you do not need to hold on to the term. You can simply feel them as ease, as familiarity, as the comfort of not having to choose each step. You breathe in slowly through your nose, and as you breathe out, the river continues. The brain prefers paths that require the least effort, just as water does. It does not seek challenge. It seeks efficiency. Over time, the flow presses lightly against the same banks, smoothing them, deepening them, making the journey quieter. This is why so much of your day once felt automatic. Why certain thoughts appeared before you asked for them. Why reactions sometimes arrived before reflection. There is no judgment in this, only design. You imagine sunlight touching the surface of the river. The water reflects softly, broken only by small ripples. This is the brain in safety, in predictability, in a world where tomorrow resembles yesterday closely enough that nothing has to change. Your breath slows a little more. You might notice that even now, as you rest here, the mind continues to wander. It may bring up fragments of the day, a sound, a word, a feeling, like leaves floating past on the surface of the water. These thoughts do not need to be stopped. They belong to the river too. You are not trying to empty your mind. You are simply watching the current. Beneath the surface, something quiet and remarkable is always happening. Cells communicate, signals pass, connections strengthen or soften. This is not something you control consciously. The brain learns by living, by repeating, by responding. Every moment you have ever spent has left the faintest impression on the riverbed. You inhale again gently and release the breath slowly, letting your shoulders soften. In science, this ongoing ability of the brain to shape itself is called neuroplasticity. But here you do not need the word. You can think of it as adaptability, as responsiveness, as the simple truth that the river is never frozen in place. For a long time, your river may have flowed through calm terrain. Even difficulties, when they came, were absorbed into the existing landscape. The banks held. The water stayed mostly where it knew how to go. Patterns formed that helped you move through life without thinking too hard about how. This is not a weakness. This is how learning works. When you learned to walk, the river carved its first clear channels. When you learned language, relationships, routines, the water returned again and again to the same routes. Over years, those routes became comfortable, automatic, trusted. You may notice a sense of warmth as you realize this, a reassurance. Your brain has always been working to make things easier for you, not harder. The river does not judge the terrain it flows through. It simply responds. Now take another slow breath in. Pause gently at the top, and let it out longer than the inhale. As you exhale, you begin to sense that this chapter is not only about calm. It is also about contrast, because rivers are shaped not only by long stretches of ease, but by moments of change, by weather, by pressure, by events that alter the land itself. You are not there yet. There is no rush. For now, you remain with the steady flow. You notice the sound of water moving over stone. You feel the ground beneath your feet, solid and supportive. The brain, in its natural state, is not dramatic. It is economical, prefers what is known. This is why habits can feel so strong, why certain thoughts return even when they are no longer useful. The river remembers where it has gone before. It recognizes the shape of the land. It follows gravity, not intention. And still, within this predictability, there is freedom. Because the same system that forms these paths also holds the quiet ability to reshape them. Not quickly, not forcefully, but patiently over time. You do not need to make anything happen. The river already knows how to move. You breathe again, allowing the breath to match the imagined pace of the water. Unhurried, continuous. With each exhale, your body settles a little deeper into the surface beneath you. The nervous system listens to this slowing. It responds. Here, in this moment, the brain senses safety. And in safety, it rests. The river widens slightly, the current smoothing. Nothing is being pushed downstream. Nothing is being held back. There is only flow. Familiar, dependable flow. As this chapter begins to close, a gentle awareness arises. Not a problem, not a worry, just a question forming like distant clouds on the horizon. You sense that this river has not always remained so calm. That at some point something may have changed the weather. Something that asked the water to move differently. You do not need to answer that now. For now you remain floating, supported, held by the current that has carried you this far. You take one more slow inhale, and a long, easy exhale. The river continues downstream, and the landscape very gradually begins to shift. You are still floating when you notice it. Not suddenly, not violently, just a subtle change in the air. The light above the river softens. The temperature shifts by a fraction. The water, which has been moving so predictably, begins to respond to something unseen. This is how storms arrive in the brain. Not always as loud moments, but as changes in pressure. As a sense that something in the environment no longer matches what the river expects. You breathe in gently, and as you breathe out, the sky grows heavier. In science, trauma is often described as an event. But here, you are invited to feel it differently. Trauma is not only what happens. It is what changes the landscape. It is the moment the river realizes that the ground beneath it is no longer the same. The rain begins slowly. Each drop touches the surface, creating small rings that spread and fade. At first, the river absorbs them easily. This is what the brain tries to do. It relies on familiar pathways. It uses what it already knows. It assumes the storm will pass quickly, just like others before it. You may notice your breath responding, perhaps becoming a little shallower. That is all right. As the rain continues, the water level rises. The river moves faster now, not by choice, but by necessity. Sounds grow sharper. Edges feel closer. Light reflects differently off the surface. This is the brain becoming alert, attuned, focused on one thing only: protection. This is not panic. It is intelligence. The brain has evolved to notice storms, to respond before damage occurs. When the environment becomes unpredictable, the river tightens its course. It flows faster, hugging the safest ground it can find. Attention narrows. Memory becomes vivid. The senses turn up their volume. You inhale slowly through your nose, and let the breath fall out of you, unforced. Trauma does not mean the river is broken. It means the storm was strong enough to demand change. When the rain intensifies, the banks can no longer hold the same way they once did. Water spills into nearby ground. New channels begin to form, not because the river wants them, but because it must keep moving. You may recognize this feeling, the sense that reactions happen before thought, that your body responds before your mind understands. The rain becomes heavier now. The surface of the river darkens. The sound of water deepens, steady and loud. The brain is no longer drifting. It is working. Every signal matters. Every sensation could carry meaning. This is where the nervous system steps forward. Without numbers or diagrams, you can feel it as readiness. Muscles subtly tighten. Breath changes rhythm. Awareness spreads outward, scanning. The river is no longer just flowing. It is watching the sky. You are not doing this. It is happening for you. You rest your attention on the sound of rain, on the imagined coolness of water against skin. You notice that even now, there is no chaos. Only movement responding to conditions. The storm does not ask permission, and neither does adaptation. As the rain continues, some familiar paths become harder to follow. The old riverbed fills too quickly. The water looks for lower ground, for easier passage. It presses gently but persistently against the edges of the landscape, testing where it might go next. This is how new neural pathways begin, not with intention but with pressure. You breathe again, slower now, letting the exhale last just a little longer than the inhale. There is reassurance here even in the storm. The river has not stopped. It has not frozen. It has not disappeared. It is still moving forward, guided by gravity and survival. The brain does not abandon its purpose when conditions change. It adapts its route. You may notice a sense of tiredness. Storms require energy. The brain, working to keep you safe, uses more resources than before. This is why fatigue often follows prolonged stress. The river has been carrying more weight. Still, the rain begins to soften. Not all at once, but gradually. Drops grow farther apart. The sound lightens. The water level stabilizes. When the storm passes, the landscape remains altered. Some banks have shifted. Some ground has been reshaped. The river cannot return entirely to how it once flowed. And that is not loss. It is information. You inhale gently, feeling the chest rise. And as you exhale, you sense the water slowing. The storm has done its work. The brain has learned something about the world. It has updated its understanding of safety. It has begun preparing new routes, just in case the sky darkens again. This is not weakness. This is memory doing its job. As the clouds thin, the river continues forward. Not quite the same as before. A little wider, a little more cautious. The water still reflects light, but now it also remembers shadow. You remain floating, supported, unharmed. And as the rain fades into mist, you sense the river beginning to search quietly, not for the old path, but for the right one. The breath leaves you slowly. The water moves on, and the ground beneath the river, forever so slightly, has changed. You notice the river before you notice yourself. It is still moving, still finding its way forward. The storm has passed, but its presence lingers in the shape of the land. The water does not rush now. It does something quieter, pays attention. The current adjusts its pace, responding to what the river has learned about the terrain beneath it. You breathe in slowly, and as you breathe out, the water steadies. This is the moment where protection becomes visible, not as tension, but as care. The brain does not replay the storm to frighten you. It remembers so it can guide the river more safely next time. Every subtle shift in flow is an act of preservation. The river leans toward ground that feels firm. It avoids places that once gave way. In science, this instinct is woven deep into the nervous system. But here, you do not need the structures or the names. You can feel it as preference, as the way attention settles faster on certain signals, as how your body sometimes responds before words form. You are not overreacting. You are adapting. The river presses gently against its banks, testing their strength. It does not carve aggressively. It explores with patience. Where the soil is soft, the water lingers a little longer. Where resistance fades, a new channel begins to appear. This is neuroplasticity at its most tender. Not force, not urgency, just quiet redirection. You may notice warmth in your chest as this understanding settles. The brain is not trying to trap you in old reactions. It is trying to keep the water flowing without harm. Protection here is not fear, it is foresight. You inhale again, letting the breath move low and easy. On the exhale, your shoulders release. The river has learned that speed is not always safety. Sometimes slowing reveals paths that were invisible before. Sometimes moving gently allows the ground to hold without collapsing. The brain, in its wisdom, begins to balance alertness with rest. This balance is learned slowly. Each time the water chooses a slightly calmer route, the channel becomes a little clearer. Each time the river avoids a sharp edge, the memory of safety grows. The brain stores these experiences not as stories, but as sensations, ease, steadiness, warmth. You may recognize this in moments when calm arrives unexpectedly, when your body settles without explanation, when breath deepens on its own. This is the river trusting itself again. Protection does not mean rigidity. It means flexibility guided by experience. The river does not wall itself off from the world. It remains open to rain, to change, to movement. But now it carries knowledge. It knows which bends require care, which banks need reinforcement, which paths allow flow without strain. You breathe softly, almost without sound. The water continues shaping the land, grain by grain. New pathways form quietly, often beneath the surface. You may not notice them at first. They reveal themselves over time, in different reactions, softer responses, moments where the old current no longer pulls as strongly. Nothing has been forced. Nothing has been erased. The old riverbed still exists. It always will. Familiar paths remain available, especially when the brain senses threat. This is not regression. It is backup. The nervous system keeps its tools close, even as it learns new ones. You inhale, pause gently, and exhale longer. As you float, you sense that protection is not a barrier. It is a guide. The river is not closing in on itself. It is learning how to move with less damage, less friction, less urgency. This instinct to protect the flow is not something you need to manage. It operates quietly in the background, like the steady pull of gravity. You do not have to tell the river where to go. You only need to allow it time. Time is the element the river understands best. As this chapter softens toward its end, you notice the water beginning to settle into new grooves. They are still narrow, still fresh, but they hold. The current passes through them smoothly without resistance. You feel a sense of reassurance. Not excitement, not relief, just calm acceptance. The river is learning. The brain is adjusting, and nothing is being rushed. You take one more slow breath in, and let it out unhurried. The river continues forward, guided by care rather than fear. And somewhere just ahead, in quieter ground, new channels are beginning to form. You begin to notice the silence first. Not an absence of sound, but a gentler texture to it. The river has moved away from the loud terrain and into softer ground. Here, the current slows almost on its own. You breathe in easily, and as you breathe out, the water settles into a quieter rhythm. After the storm, after the instinct to protect, the brain looks for places where it can work without disturbance. This is where change truly begins. Not in urgency, not in effort, but in stillness. The river does not carve new channels by force. It does so by lingering. You imagine the water spreading into a wide, shallow plain. The soil here is receptive. It does not resist. It allows the river to rest against it, gently shaping the ground through repeated, patient contact. This is how new neural pathways form. Not during moments of intensity, but during calm repetition. During sleep. During safety. During pauses that feel almost empty. The brain needs quiet in order to rewire. It needs the absence of threat to notice alternatives. You inhale softly through your nose. There is no rush to exhale. In these quiet places, the river experiments. It sends thin streams into nearby ground. Some fade quickly. Others hold just barely. Each one is a possibility, not a commitment. The brain explores without pressure, testing what feels stable, what allows flow without strain. You may recognize this as small shifts. Moments where a familiar reaction does not fully arrive. Pauses where there used to be immediacy. Nothing announces these changes. They are subtle, almost invisible. Like moonlight reflecting on newly damp earth. You only notice them if you are not trying too hard. You breathe out slowly, feeling the body sink a little deeper. In science, repetition strengthens connections. But here, repetition is gentle. It is not practice. It is presence. The river returns to these quiet places simply because they feel easier. And ease is persuasive. Each time the water flows through a new channel, the ground becomes slightly more defined. Each time the brain experiences safety without harm, the nervous system records it, not as data but as relief. Relief is a powerful teacher. You imagine night falling over the river. The surface grows smooth. Reflections stretch and blur. The world feels slower. This is when the brain does much of its quiet work. During rest, it reviews the day, the sensations, the shifts. It decides what to keep. You are not involved in this process. You do not need to supervise it. You inhale again, noticing the rise of your chest. And as you exhale, the river deepens. These new channels are not dramatic. They do not erase the old ones. They exist alongside them, offering alternatives. When the water has a choice, It begins to favor the path that feels least effortful, least reactive. This is why calm experiences matter more than explanations. The brain learns through feeling, not instruction. When the body feels safe, the river remembers the route that led there. You may feel a sense of warmth spreading through your limbs, a subtle heaviness, as if gravity has become more supportive. This is the nervous system recognizing quiet as permission. Permission to soften. Permission to change. The river does not rush this process. It returns night after night, breath after breath, reinforcing what feels stable. Over time, the channels widen. The flow becomes more reliable. The water no longer hesitates when it approaches these paths. You breathe, slow and steady, matching the rhythm of the current. As this chapter draws toward its end, you sense how much of change happens without awareness. While you rest, while you sleep, while you simply exist in moments that do not demand anything from you. The river continues shaping the land even when you are not watching. You take one more gentle inhale, and a long, soft exhale. The quiet places hold. The channels deepen. And as moonlight lingers on the water's surface, the river carries these new paths forward, ready to be used, when the moment calls for them. You notice it without surprise. The river, for all its new channels, still remembers where it has been. As you float, the water drifts close to an older bend. The current does not rush into it, but it recognizes the shape immediately. The ground here is smooth, worn down by years of flow. There is comfort in its familiarity. You breathe in slowly, and as you breathe out, the river pauses at the edge of the old path. This is something the brain does naturally. New channels may form, but the older ones remain deeper, wider, and easier to find. They were carved through repetition, through time. The brain does not abandon them simply because alternatives exist. This is not failure. It is efficiency. When conditions feel uncertain, the river returns to what it knows will hold. Old pathways require less energy. They are predictable. In moments of fatigue, stress, or sudden change, the water chooses the route that feels safest, not the one that is newest. You may recognize this in yourself. A reaction that returns unexpectedly. A thought pattern that feels familiar, even when it no longer serves you. You inhale again gently. There is no need to resist. The river does not judge itself for remembering. Memory is not an error. It is a record of what once worked. The brain stores these paths not as mistakes, but as options, kept available in case they are needed again. Old channels are not enemies. They are archives. You imagine the water slipping briefly into a familiar curve. It moves quickly there, effortlessly. The ease is undeniable. This is why change can feel tiring. New channels are still narrow. They require attention. Old paths do not ask anything from the river. You breathe out slowly, feeling the body soften. In science, this is why habits persist. The nervous system prefers reliability. It does not seek novelty for its own sake. It seeks stability. When the brain senses threat or exhaustion, it defaults to what has been reinforced most often. This does not undo progress. Each time the river returns to an old path and then gently leaves it again, the new channels still remain. They are not erased by use of the familiar. They wait quietly, patient, ready to receive the water when conditions allow. You may feel reassurance in this. You are not moving backward. You are moving through layers. The river carries its history without being trapped by it. Old paths coexist with new ones. Over time, as the water flows more often through the calmer channels, those paths slowly deepen. The old ones, while still present, lose some of their pull. Nothing needs to be forced. You inhale softly, noticing the rise and fall of your breath. As you exhale, the river begins to drift back toward the newer ground. There is kindness in this process. The brain does not demand perfection. It allows oscillation. It understands that learning is not linear. The water moves where gravity and experience guide it. You imagine the river holding both routes at once. The old bed, smooth and known. The newer channel, quieter and growing stronger. Both belong to the landscape. As this chapter settles, you sense a gentle invitation, not to eliminate the old, but to allow space for the new. Each calm moment, each safe pause, gives the river another chance to choose differently. You take one more slow inhale, and let it out long and easy. The river continues forward, carrying its past without being pulled under by it. And just ahead, in softer ground, the quieter path waits, ready whenever the water feels able to return. You notice the river slowing even further now, not because it is tired, but because the land allows it. The light has shifted again. The air feels cooler. The surface of the water grows darker and smoother, reflecting less of what is above and more of what lies beneath. This is the hour when movement becomes subtle and deep. You breathe in gently, and as you breathe out, the river sinks into itself. Change in the brain does not happen when everything is loud. It happens when there is room. Rest creates that room. When the nervous system no longer scans the horizon, the river can finally listen to its own depth. You imagine night settling over the landscape. Sounds soften, edges blur. The water moves slowly, deliberately, touching the ground with more presence. This is when the brain begins to organize what it has learned. You are not directing this. You are allowing it. During rest, the river revisits the day's paths. It traces both the old beds and the newer channels, sensing where the flow felt smooth and where it strained. Without effort, it begins to favor what required less force. This is how the brain consolidates change. Not by thinking harder, but by going quiet. You inhale again, slow and low. The exhale lengthens naturally. In science, sleep and stillness are where integration occurs. But here you can feel it as deepening. The channels that were tentative during the day grow slightly wider at night. The water settles into them without hesitation. Nothing dramatic happens. And that is the point. The river does not need to be awake to reshape the land. It needs stillness. When you rest, the brain is free from immediate demands. It is free to strengthen what felt safe, to soften what felt strained. You may notice a heaviness in your limbs. Pleasant weight. This is the nervous system standing down from its post, trusting that the environment is calm enough to allow repair. You breathe out, letting that weight sink. Rest is not absence. It is activity without effort. As the river moves slowly through the night, it reinforces the paths that brought ease. It lets go of edges that no longer serve. The brain does not argue with itself here. It simply follows the current of comfort. You imagine the water deepening its newer channels, pressing gently into the earth again and again. Each pass leaves a trace. Each trace makes the path easier to find the next time. This is why forcing change during exhaustion rarely works. The river cannot reshape the land while fighting to stay afloat. It needs quiet banks, steady ground, and time. You inhale softly, pause for a moment, and release. In this darkness, the river feels protected. The storm is far behind now. There is no need to watch the sky. The brain lowers its guard, trusting the landscape enough to continue its work unseen. You do not need to witness this process. It continues whether you notice it or not. As the chapter begins to close, you sense the river carrying forward what it has learned in rest. The channels formed here will appear again in waking moments, subtle but present. You take one final slow breath in, and a long, quiet exhale. The river keeps moving through the night, and in its unhurried, unseen way, rest continues shaping the flow. You notice the river returning, not circling back in confusion, but arriving again with familiarity. Morning light touches the water softly. The land is calm. Nothing demands immediate change. And in this quiet continuity, the river does what it does best. It repeats what felt safe. You breathe in slowly, and as you breathe out, the water moves forward with ease. Repetition is not insistence. It is preference. The brain does not strengthen pathways by force, but by return. Each time the river flows through a calmer channel, the ground gives a little more. The path becomes clearer, wider, more welcoming. You are not practicing anything. You are simply living. The river moves through the newer stream again. It remembers how this route felt. Less resistance, fewer sharp turns. That memory is not stored in words. It lives in sensation. in the body's quiet agreement. You inhale again, letting the breath come naturally. The exhale follows, unhurried. With each return, the water smooths the edges of the channel. Small stones settle. The current no longer hesitates. What was once narrow begins to feel reliable. The brain learns through experience, not effort. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Gentle repetition tells the nervous system that safety was not an accident. It happened again, and again, and again. The river listens. You may notice moments like this in your own life. A reaction softening. A pause where there used to be immediacy. A breath arriving before tension. These are not breakthroughs. They are widenings. Nothing announces them. They simply appear. You breathe out slowly, feeling the chest and shoulders ease. The river does not need novelty. It needs steadiness. Each calm return confirms the terrain. Each unremarkable moment teaches the brain that this path can be trusted. Over time, the current shifts almost imperceptibly. The water begins choosing the newer channel without deliberation. The old path still exists, but it no longer pulls as strongly. Ease becomes the guiding force. You inhale softly, noticing how the breath itself repeats without effort. Repetition does not trap the river. Freeze it. The brain is not seeking excitement. It is seeking regulation. When the same calm experience occurs again and again, the nervous system adjusts its expectations. The river flows with less vigilance, less urgency. You imagine the stream widening now, carrying more water with the same gentle pace. The banks are stable. The flow feels confident, unforced. You rest your attention on that steadiness. As this chapter begins to settle, you sense that repetition is not about doing more. It is about allowing what already works to happen again. The river widens simply because it is used. You take one more slow inhale, and a long, easy exhale. The water continues along its now familiar path. And with each gentle return, the stream grows wider, calmer, and more its own. You notice the movement within the river before you name it. A subtle pull, a quiet force that has always been there. Emotion moves through the water like a current. It does not block the river. It is the river's motion. When you stop trying to resist it, the flow becomes easier to feel. You breathe in slowly, and as you breathe out, the current reveals itself. For a long time, emotions may have felt like interruptions. Waves that disrupted calm, surges that carried you somewhere unexpected. But here, in this wider stream, you sense something different. Emotion is not an obstacle. It is information moving through the system. The brain does not learn from explanations alone. It learns from feeling. The river carries warmth, coolness, heaviness, lightness. Each sensation shifts the current slightly, guiding the water toward paths that fit. Emotion gives direction, not danger. You inhale again, letting the chest open gently. The exhale follows, slow and grounding. When emotion is allowed to move, the river stays fluid. When it is resisted, the water presses harder against the banks. This is not punishment. It is physics. Flow seeks movement. You may notice how the body responds when feeling is met with openness. Shoulders soften. Breath deepens. The current steadies. The nervous system recognizes that the river is not trapped. Emotion does not need to be analyzed here. It needs to be carried. The river does not label the temperature of the water. It simply adjusts to it. In the same way, the brain responds to sensation without judgment when it is given space. You breathe out slowly, feeling the current move through you. In moments of calm, emotion may feel gentle, almost invisible. In moments of intensity, it may surge. Both are part of the same river. Neither needs to be stopped for the water to remain safe. You imagine the stream bending naturally with the current, not fighting it. The water finds its path through responsiveness, not control. This is how regulation emerges. The brain becomes steadier not by suppressing feeling, but by allowing it to pass through without alarm. Emotion completes its movement, and the river remains clear. You inhale softly, noticing the rhythm of breath matching the current. As this chapter settles, you sense a new relationship forming. Emotion is no longer something to get past. It is something that carries you forward, shaping the flow with quiet precision. You take one more slow breath in, and let it out long and smooth. The river continues, guided by its own current. And emotion, no longer resisted, becomes part of the calm that holds the flow. You feel it before you think it. A softness in the way the water moves. A quiet confidence in the current. The river no longer hesitates at each bend. It flows forward with a steadiness that does not require attention. The land has proven itself. The channels have held. And now trust begins to form. You breathe in slowly, and as you breathe out, the water moves without effort. Trust in the brain is not a thought. It is a sensation. It lives in the body as ease, as the absence of constant scanning, as a rhythm that feels self-sustaining. The river has tested its newer paths many times now. They have carried the current safely. They have widened with repetition. The brain notices this not consciously but deeply. You are not convincing it. You are showing it. Each calm experience has left a trace. Each moment where nothing went wrong has quietly strengthened the sense that the environment can be navigated without urgency. The river begins choosing the smoother route automatically. You inhale again, allowing the breath to deepen on its own. The exhale lengthens, unforced. Hypervigilance softens not because it is argued away, but because it is no longer needed. The river lowers its guard when the land continues to support it. Protection relaxes into presence. You may notice how the body responds to this trust. Muscles release without instruction. The jaw loosens. The breath finds a natural depth. The nervous system recognizes stability and responds with calm. This is learning completed. The river does not forget the storms it survived. It simply no longer flows as if they are happening now. Memory becomes context, not command. You imagine the water gliding through a familiar stretch of land, sunlight touching the surface. The flow feels assured. The river knows its own shape. You breathe out slowly, feeling grounded in that steadiness. Trust does not mean the absence of future storms. It means confidence in the ability to respond. The river trusts itself because it has learned, through experience, that it can adapt. You are carried by this trust. As this chapter draws toward its close, you sense a quiet settling. The river no longer seeks reassurance. It moves forward because movement feels safe. You take one more slow inhale, and a long, peaceful exhale. The river flows on, steady and self-assured. And in this trust, the landscape feels whole again. Changed, but stable and deeply familiar.